Welcome, everyone, to our program tonight on commercial fishing, sustainable sourcing, and your body on omega 3s. I'm super excited to welcome our Waukesha County Green Team board member, Adra Kusnirova. Did I get that right, Adra?
You did.
Okay, good. With us tonight to speak with us. Adra's going to present for about 25 minutes, half an hour, and then there's a ton of time for questions. So whenever you have a question, drop it in the chat and we will get to them all. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you, Adra.
Okay, thank you, Joanna. Hi, I'm Adra. I'm the owner of Alaska Fresh, and I'm excited to speak to you tonight or whatever time you might be listening into this. I'll try to keep my eye on the chat for questions. Feel free to drop them in at any time. And then we can go over them at the end. And if everyone could just drop in the chat right now your name, where you are dialing in from, and what's your most burning question about this topic, actually. That will just help me gauge where to focus my attention because there's a lot of information, many layers on the commercial fishing industry and on fish and how to get it. And I am dialing in from Menominee Falls, which is right outside of Milwaukee, part of Waukesha. Oh, my mom's here. My mom. All right. Well, I'll keep my eye on that. Oh, cool. Hi, Connie. Health of farm raised versus wild. Okay. All right. Let's get started here. Joanna McGonigal, health of the seafood population. Thank you, Joanna. All right. So just want to start out with some qualifiers so that you can trust in what I'm saying. I lived in Brookfield. I'm from Brookfield, met my husband in Chicago, moved to Alaska, lived there for 4 summers while he managed a seafood processing plant in Cordova. This is my husband on the left side, co-owner of the company. He came to Alaska on an exchange visa as an exchange student and worked in the seafood industry for 13 years until we left Alaska, relocated back to Wisconsin, and started our company because when we left, the main question we got from our friends and family was, well, how are we going to get fish from you now? Because people had tasted the difference between what we were bringing back from the wild waters versus what they were used to, and they were hooked on it. So now we have Alaska Fresh and we sell wild Alaskan seafood. And before I moved to Alaska, I knew like very little about seafood, very little about the industry. And so I am super passionate about sharing as much as I can with everybody because there's a lot to know and the waters are um, literally and figuratively muddy, and I want you all to have the tools to be able to navigate that. All right. And hi, Therese. Health benefits of salmon. Okay, cool. All right. I am going to play a little video. I hope this works. Can you see it okay? And you can hear it?
We can see it, but we can't hear it.
You can't hear it. Okay.
So to hear it, you'd have to stop sharing your screen and then go to share your screen again, but click, there's a little box that says share with audio.
Thank you. Share sound. Got it. Thank you so much. Sorry, Zoom is asking me for my password. Okay, we're gonna pivot. We're gonna not share this video. Sorry. But what I wanted to do here was just introduce you guys to the community of Cordoba and basically like the concept of a fishing village, because I'm going to be touching on that quite a bit during this presentation and why it's important and relates to seafood sustainability. So, sustainable seafood, what does that even mean? For me, it means I I think it's important to unpack the word sustainable because there's a lot of um, greenwashing that's going on with the word. So for me, it means being connected to your seafood source and being knowing where your fish comes from. So let me get into that. All right, so this is a map of Alaska and fishing districts. You can see here's Prince William Sound, and here's the Copper River Flats. And the way that fishing works in the United States, at least, is there are fishing districts. The ocean is divided into districts, and those are like how we have counties on land. So, for example, it's hunting season in Wisconsin right now, and different counties have different regulations. Different fishing districts across the United States have different regulations for what can be caught, how much can be caught, at what time, um, population management. So that is how it's broken down from a regulatory geographical standpoint. So when you're at the grocery store or you are at a restaurant, you should ask where the fish is from. That is your homework after listening into this presentation. The next time you're out to eat, if it's a Friday fish fry, ask your waitress or waiter, where is the fish from? If they know, like, please let me know where that restaurant is because I want to go eat there. Um, they will hopefully be able to ask the chef, and then the chef can tell you. Otherwise, the buck will probably stop there. There is not a ton of traceability in seafood. And so we as consumers and customers can help the industry and fish health population along by always asking, where is this from? Where is this from? Because we should know where our fish is coming from. And I know there were questions about like PFAs in seafood and other toxins, which I'm going to get into later in the presentation. And unless you know where the fish is coming from, it's hard to answer that question. So where is the fishery and what is it? And then, yeah, read every label if you're at the store. Euro was at a big box store in the area last week, and he said, "Oh, they have Alaskan salmon in stock, but it was made in China." And I said, "What?" And it actually said it on the label, and that does happen, that seafood processing can be less expensive on a mass volume. So salmon is sent to China and then it's processed and then it is sent back here. But there is plenty of salmon available that's caught in the United States, processed in the United States, and stays within the United States. So just keep an eye out for that. Another thing that you want to look for on labels is this certified sustainable seafood, MSC. That's the Marine Stewardship Council logo. And that is kind of like the organic fair trade marker of the seafood industry. If you see that, it means that the fishery, the fishing region, has been audited by this nonprofit that's based in the UK called MSC, and they've gone through stringent questionnaires and testing and site visits. And according to the MSC, they are certified as sustainable. More and more with logos and certifications, there are issues coming out that they can actually eliminate some people. like eliminate some sellers and marketers who are smaller and can't afford the certifications because they're super expensive to have on each package. Like, for example, we have the MSC label on our logo on our website, but we don't have it on each package of fish because it's very expensive. And then we would have to pass that along to the consumer. So if it doesn't have a label on it, it doesn't mean that it's not, so that the fishery isn't certified as sustainable, but that is a good place to start when you're at the grocery store. Sorry, I know that's kind of like a convoluted explanation, but that's how it works with the logos. You can also look for the Alaska Seafood logo. That will automatically tell you that the fish is wild. Fish farms are not legal in Alaska. They are banned because fish have escaped from open net pens in British Columbia. The farmed fish have escaped, and then they have bred with the wild population and tainted the DNA and lineage of the wild population. So Alaska said, absolutely not. The biologists are very, very, very protective up there. And Alaska actually has two sentences about sustainability baked into its state constitution, saying that the state will be responsible for the sustainability of its lands. And so the state has a lot of jurisdiction over what happens versus federal regulators coming in. So if you see the Alaska seafood label, it means it's wild. Aquaculture is a thing, and aquaculture is just like agriculture, but in the water, farming in the water. So there is farming in the water in Alaska, but that is only with mussels and kelp. And there was just an industry trade show in Seattle this past week, and there's a prize for like the most innovative seafood item every year, and the winner this year was kelp vodka. Yeah, I know. Sounds kind of interesting. So, yeah, the first thing is just know where your fish is from, ask questions, because that will help change how our system, how our broken untraceability system is working. So, the second thing is to know the harvest method. And this can be really tricky because it's not always on the label. And even if the label says wild caught, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing. And I'll say this for farmed seafood as well, because there's like this big farmed versus wild debate. And I used to be on the side of like farmed fish is bad, it's terrible, but that's not true. There's how many billions of people on the planet now, and we need protein to feed people. So we need to have aquaculture and fish farming. There are good fish farms and there are bad fish farms. There are clean, heavily regulated, regenerative fish farms like Superior Fresh in northern Wisconsin is a great one. And then there's bad fish farms that are like being started in the desert where there aren't good water sources. I won't go off on that tangent, but then there are good wild fish sources, like from Alaska is like a poster child for worldwide regulators because they're so invested in the sustainability standpoint. And then there are bad ways of wild fishing. One of them is bottom trawling with, it's called pelagic trawling. And this is where a net the size of a football field drags the ocean floor, takes basically everything in its path, and has a lot of bycatch. And bycatch is when there's a different, that means that there's a different type of fish that's caught other than what the focus is on. So I just took a little snippet. I did a quick Google of trawler boats this afternoon, and these are the headlines that came up. Bottom trawling ban, current protections, just lines on a map. So there, people are saying like the regulations aren't strong enough. Pollock trawl closure sends economic ripples across Kodiak as fishermen adapt. Pollock trawling is screwing Alaskans. So pollock is the fish that's in McFish, the McFish sandwich, which is my favorite thing. I don't eat McDonald's a lot, but when I do, I get a McFish. And I used to be able to tell people like, hey, you're even safe if you go to McDonald's. You can eat sustainable seafood because McDonald's has that MSC certified um, label that they're advertising on their menu, but there is so much bycatch that's causing so much damage to the ocean floors that it's not a sustainable seafood, and it's affecting king salmon. King salmon aren't returning to native villages, which is causing food scarcity. Did someone just unmute themselves? No. Okay. Um, so I want you all, if you leave this presentation with any information, like remembering anything, just remember trawler boats and like do not source your fish from trawler boats. So there are a lot of groups doing advocacy work against trawler boats. This is a Facebook group called Stop Alaskan Trawler Bycatch. And I just want to put a disclaimer, you cannot believe everything you read in a Facebook group, but there is a lot of interesting discussion in there, a lot of interesting updates about regulations that are being proposed and made, and it's a resource that I wanted to share with you. And then there is also this organization called Salmon State, and they advocate for different issues with ocean health in Alaska. They're another great one to follow, and they actually have a petition going on right now. They're requesting signatures by, I think it's 5 p.m. tomorrow to block a proposal to have a trawl fishery, like have a huge boat comb the ocean bottom in a region where our fish are harvested. So that hits close to home for me. So if you're in the mood to sign a petition tonight, during this presentation, head on over to salmonstate.org/bycatch and block the proposal for trawl fishing. And the native groups in the area are also very opposed to that. We're concerned over ocean health. So the third thing you can do is know the source fishery regulations. So that means catch limits, the season openers, and this is hard to do, right? If we're just buying a piece of tilapia from wherever, from Pick and Save, you just like, you want to have your dinner, right? But it's something to think about. And it's like, you just have to think about how the ripple effect of your purchase and where that's going to go. I know I'm like preaching to the choir here, and everyone that's tuned in is probably on that already, but each fishery has limits they can catch, a season when they can catch, openers, and then there are Board of Fish meetings that rule all of this. I don't think the waitress is going to know about that, but following those resources that I gave you would be useful. I think the best way to go about it is to know your fishmonger. This is a picture of Euro and I and our son Vinny in Alaska this past May. We went up to meet with all of our fishermen and to just keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on, and to visit our community where we used to live. Your fishmonger can be your butcher at the deli counter of your local grocery store. And a lot of people that work in that capacity, they do care about what your questions are and they want to provide good fish to you. So, again, you having the power as the consumer, talk to your fishmonger and tell them what's important to you so that they can put it in their deli case. So, fishing communities, like not to sound like a doomsdayer here, but fishing communities are on the brink of collapse like around the world. This is another um, screen grab from this afternoon. I just Googled fishing village and news, and this is what came up. Snow crab collapse due to ecological shift in the Bering Sea. Atlantic herring fishery teeters on the edge of collapse. Um, Pink salmon and Homer. The pink salmon just didn't show up this year. And why am I sharing this? Is it's because when you decide to source wild or from a community that is really established on fishing, you're not just supporting the store that you're buying from, you're supporting these families who have these artisanal practices that they have been following for generation after generation, using a certain type of net, a certain type of boat, a certain type of bait. They have a certain type of spot. They're very in tune with nature and with the environment. And so if we don't source from the correct sources, then they are going to continue to disappear. All right, let's get into the health stuff. So, according to the dietary guidelines for Americans, almost 90% of the US population aged 1 or older do not meet the dietary recommendations for seafood intake. And that's why I also like to highlight that like farmed fish isn't terrible because seafood does not have a big seat at the table as it is compared to poultry or beef. So I'm just happy when people tell me they're eating seafood at all because it's like, okay, great, there's interest. You can now like refine your seafood sourcing and your seafood consciousness. And I'm sure that's why all of you are here tonight. So, I already touched on the farm versus wild, but just so you have a visual, this is what an open net pen system looks like on the left. So there's a lot of infrastructure in the water, and fish do escape from these pens. And then on the right is a picture of ocean fishing, wild fishing without the pens. And there's actually a series on Netflix right now called Billionaire Island. If anyone's watched it, drop a little note in the chat. But it's about a family of Norwegian or like a little community of Norwegian fishers and their storied history and salmon farming. But I think it's good. Okay, nutrition. Omega 3s. That's the big thing with fish, right? It's like I'm gonna eat my salmon, I'm gonna get my omega 3s. So which which type of fish has the most omega 3s? In the salmon family, Alaskan king has the highest level of omega 3 fatty acids per serving. And I think this is based on a 3 or 4 ounce serving. I can clarify that afterwards. Oh yeah, 3 ounces. And then actually there is a fish that trumps wild Alaskan salmon, and that is sablefish, also known as black cod. And that has a sweet taste to it, kind of like crab legs. It's becoming more and more popular in the United States, but the majority of it is exported to Japan. But yeah, it actually trumps salmon. And why do we need omega 3 fatty acids? Primarily because our body doesn't make them on its own. So we need to supplement. either with a pill or with seafood. The recommended amount of seafood to eat a week is 2 servings or more. And omega 3s keep our brain very elastic. Um, Seafood is a well known recommended staple by doctors for Alzheimer prevention, mood booster, cognitive boosting, fertility support. If your doctor has you on an elimination diet, unless you are allergic to fish or shellfish, seafood is 9 times out of 10 allowed in that diet. So tons and tons of health benefits there. And then you can see also the other categories and how the fish rank. And I'm happy to share this afterwards. Okay, so let's talk about toxins, which I hate talking about, but we have to talk about it because they're everywhere. So, the USDA, the US FDA, just released a request last week that's getting a lot of headlines. They are requesting information from scientists and researchers about contaminants in seafood. So there is no super comprehensive reporting about it right now. I'm guessing they're going to find them because PFAS are being found in placentas, in newborns, in tiny bait fish that large fish are eating. So they are everywhere, but I do think that they are going to be more concentrated in areas where there are more PFAS. So a question I get at the farmers markets a lot is, well, what about Lake Michigan salmon? How does this compare to Lake Michigan salmon? Lake Michigan salmon is not recommended for pregnant women, and you cannot eat it as sushi grade. Alaskan salmon is still sushi grade and can be eaten by pregnant women. Does that have to do, I mean, is more information going to come out about that in relation to PFAS? Probably, but you do have to consider like the water quality and remoteness of your food when you're sourcing it from there. Okay, and then this on the right was a video or is a video about mercury content in fish. And I'll just summarize what this nutritionist had to say. So, in terms of mercury, that was like a big thing in the 90s. Like, there's mercury in the fish, and you can only eat it this many times a week. And I feel like maybe that's why Americans don't have enough seafood in their diets because everyone's like, oh, I don't want the mercury. But in larger fish, there are lower quantities of mercury, and salmon is the best fish to eat to counteract the mercury because it has selenium in it, and that is an element that balances that presence, like counteracts that presence of mercury. So the best fish to eat is salmon. Okay, my timer went off. I know I'm at like 30 minutes here. So, I will get into questions, but please take down my information. You can text me, call me from the grocery store. You know, what should I do about this shrimp? I am happy to see what's come through in the latest on my feed and give you the best advice that I can. And before we get into questions, some advice from a salmon. Spawn new ideas, show your true colors, swim against the current, be a good catch, cherish clean water, and always find your way home. All right. So I will just work my way backwards. Connie in Oconomowoc. Hey, Connie. If the label on the Costco wild sockeye salmon states processed in a facility that processes shellfish, crustaceans, does that probably mean China? No, that just means that shrimp or crab are processed in that facility. So there are processing facilities on the West Coast, in Seattle, in different pockets of Alaska that also process shrimp and crab. And so for food allergies, they have to have that on the label. the processing facility where our fish are processed are it's not shared with shellfish. Um, and it's good that Euro saw China on the label because that means that company is being transparent about it. But we'll see what's going to happen with the whole tariff situation. I personally feel like that's going to have a big effect on seafood. So wild Alaskan seafood is going to be more, or wild American seafood is going to be more ingrained into our diets. Okay, Jim, what efforts do you promote to reduce your packaging versus big box retailers? Great question, Jim. Thank you for that. Shoot, I wish I had a box next to me. So we partner with a company called Green Cell Foam, and we do not use styrofoam for insulation. After this, we did use styrofoam for our first year in business, been in business for 6 years. Then we switched to blue jeans. And now we're at this green cell foam, and it's a great product because it's compostable in like your vegetable scrap compost. It can go down the drain or it can be burned. And a lot of people in like the shipping of perishable items industry are switching to this green cell foam product. They're a leader in the industry for sustainability. Okay, Virginia, I hope I answered your question about the PFAS. Honestly, I don't know the difference between PCBs and PFAS. If you want to provide clarity on that, but I hope I did answer your question.
So PCBs are just a one of right thousands of PFAS. So
Okay.
I think PCBs probably were the original PFAS, right? So I think when they first came out, the government was very heavily into PCBs and preventing them and doing all sorts of different things back in the 70s. The problem is, though, the PCBs haven't really gone away because they're persistent. And because there's a lot of, shall I say, um, not mistakes. There's a lot of different means in which the PCBs right now can get airborne. The problem is they're just not, it's just not going away, even though they eliminated um, and made it illegal to manufacture PFAS, or excuse me, PCBs back in the 70s. So point being is, I guess I was just curious because PCBs and mercury are talked about a lot when it comes to fish and why you shouldn't eat them. And it's interesting to kind of take off of your comment about salmon. I didn't realize salmon are smaller than tuna. So tuna is a huge,
Much smaller.
yeah, so they're much smaller, which is why they have less mercury. So I did not know that until you mentioned it.
Oh,
Hence,
I'm glad you learned something.
yeah, so I'm quite excited because I used to eat a lot of tuna and I found out from my sister because she had a friend who ate a lot of tuna and she had some serious health issues. Yeah, it was
Okay.
bad. She used to eat it almost every day. So that's when I was like, oh my gosh, I need to eat less. But I'm really happy to hear about salmon. I did not realize that they have less mercury. But I guess PCBs, you don't know much about salmon. Um,
Yeah, PCBs on the salmon and seafood, I think it's TBD, and I think it's timely that the FDA called for this information and put out a request to all of the researchers. I don't know how long it's going to take to put that together, but at least the government is showing an interest in that. And hopefully, I think that's a step in the right direction.
yeah, like I said, it was the original one, and I thought it was one that we kind of had to watch. So, um,
I'll do
yeah,
some further digging onto that and I'll let you know.
okay.
Because we are closely connected with, there is a science center on the coast, like right next to where our fish are processed. It's called the Prince William Sound Science Center. They're also another great organization to follow, and they have teams of researchers monitoring what's going on with the sea life and marine health. Right now, I think their biggest question mark and next project will be, why didn't the millions of pink salmon return this year? Like, what happened to that wild
Interesting.
salmon run?
I think,
But I'm sure the PCB and PFAS are also on their radar.
yeah, and I think PCBs, maybe it's more prevalent, especially in Wisconsin, because it was with paper mills actually got
Hmm.
it into a lot of the water. And PCBs latch onto soil, so they're actually at the bottom of the water. And the EPA had a methodology of extracting it. And the problem is when they extract it, it gets airborne, which is how it got all over the place. And I think the EPA still does it. I don't know why they still do it. Um, and landfills actually have a tendency to make PCBs airborne as well. But I'd be most curious on, how much is in Alaska versus other places, and maybe the answer is Alaskan waters don't have as much,
I
um,
would guess yes. Yeah, that
because
it's
they don't
definitely
really have
less.
manufacturing. And I would think, it's pretty far away for airborne particles to go, but what do I know? So I was just kind
Yeah,
of,
I mean, it's the thing that like they're finding PFAS in remote, in the ice caps, and they're
oh,
just everywhere. But it's like, what's the best what's our best option right now? Because this
right.
is this is where we're at. So thank you for that.
Okay.
I will continue to keep you posted as I learn more.
Okay. Sounds good.
Appreciate
Thanks.
your question.
Yep.
Okay. And then Joanna, concerns about the health of the seafood population, farm raised versus wild. So I think I touched on all of the ones that are in the chat, but feel free to unmute yourself and ask anything else. It really is like a lot to take in.
Adra, while we're giving people a few minutes to type their questions in, what I know you touched on a couple different times, like something to take away. What are your excuse me, what are your three big takeaways for us as consumers to to help the sustainability of the seafood industry in total?
Yes, thank you for that. So my first request would be to ask questions when you are, well, my first one would be to eat more seafood, to give it a seat at the table. I think a lot of people are intimidated. It is a more expensive protein, so you don't want to overcook it. But there's so many resources out there. You can even put me on the phone, Zoom me from your kitchen, and I'll help you. Um, and if you are getting a high quality seafood and it's sushi grade, then it's okay if it is a little bit undercooked. So I would challenge and invite everyone to eat more seafood as consumers. And I think it's a good balance with the conversation going on around methane and beef and deforestation. There's swaths of the rainforest being cleared to raise cattle, and then the cows are emitting all this methane, which it has like a higher emission level than carbon. So yeah, let's bring more seafood to our tables. And then when you are buying the seafood or ordering the seafood, just start a conversation. I think starting the conversation is more important than getting the answer, because then you'll be the first chain in that ripple effect of, oh, the waitress was never asked that before, so now she's going to be curious and talk to the chef, and the chef's going to look into it, and maybe they're going to switch their purveyor from big box or big distributor Cisco to a smaller purveyor that has more traceability with their product. So ask questions, start the conversation, and then I would say, God, I hate to be like, buy American, but I do think that we do have a responsibility to buy American seafood to save our coastal communities. There's a lot of fisher people in the Gulf right now that are struggling, a lot of shrimpers. So if you like to eat shrimp, look for wild harvested in the Gulf. And the same on the East Coast with the crabbers to really prove that there is a market for that seafood when policymakers are weighing, well, should we install wind farms in the ocean and take that, area away from the wild fishermen who've been there for generations, or should we look at preserving this culture and this way of life and this food source? I think that wild fish is also unique, and I would encourage everyone to eat wild as much as possible. Even if you say like I'm only going to eat wild, it's like almost impossible because it's hard to get. So my point is a wild population could collapse or disappear, at any moment. So take advantage of that while we can now, during our lifetimes. So that was more than three, but those are my those are my answers. Thank you for
Adra,
that.
I
Yes.
have one other comment. I forgot to mention this, and maybe this will spark some thoughts. At one point in time, there was some comments about fish that are farmed, and I think what they said is that for a while there, they said there was more PCBs in farmed fish than wild fish, and they found out it was because of the fish that they were feeding them had
Mm,
PCBs in them. So, but apparently now I've read that they've tried to fix that. So they're trying to make sure that the food that they're feeding some of these farmed fish um do not have as high of a
PCB
level of
free.
PCBs. Yeah. So I know there was an issue with that. So I'm assuming if they don't say anything about wild, right? Maybe there isn't an
Yeah.
issue with PCBs. So that's why I think my thought process and why I asked the question about PCBs, because I had heard something about that. But
Okay.
the fact
Yeah,
that
that's
you haven't
interesting.
heard anything is probably a good thing. So,
Yes. I would say so because I do follow all of the industry spokespeople and leaders who are sharing information about that often, and I haven't seen that as a headline in the last 3 years. So, yes, I do think that's a good sign. And you do bring up another interesting point I would like people to know about farmed fish is that there's another carbon source required to keep those fish alive and to raise those fish, and that is the food pellets that they eat. And the food pellets are often made from wild fish that are harvested. Um, so yeah, I mean it's the same thing with like with chickens and with beef. We have to raise our food. And then that kind of makes me feel like, God, I should be a vegetarian, but I can't be a vegetarian right now. Excuse me. Okay. James, are any fishermen using electric boats? That is a great question. There are some fishermen that have, there are no fishermen I know of in the districts where we source who use electric boats, but there is the conversation of electric boats. The industry trade show that I referred to earlier, where they named the kelp vodka as the innovative food winner, that's the Pacific Marine Expo, and that is all about like gear and motors. And so I'm interested to connect with my friends, and I'm actually going to ask them to about what was the conversation around electric fishing boats. There is a proposal For an electric processing plant, like a massive, massive floating ship that's a plant, that would be electric. And the idea is that it would reduce carbon emissions because it would eliminate the big boats from like having to come back to shore, and then it's mobile and it can go to the boats where they catch the fish. Um, so I would give that a Google. I'm sorry I don't have more information on that, but there are electrification conversations in the fishing industry. I will say it's expensive to get into. To get into at least the wild Alaskan fisheries. A boat can cost $200,000 and up. Then you have to buy a permit to get into the fishery, and that is it's a market price that fluctuates, but that can be anywhere from 50,000 to another 250,000 depending on what fish. So it's a huge investment to get in. So I think there would definitely have to be some government subsidies, like very strong incentives to switch these fishermen over to the electric boats because their infrastructure is, just such a big investment. And the fishermen, they're like the farmers. They are getting the least amount for the fish. So there's not always funds, if the fishing's good, the fishing's good, and then maybe they could upgrade, but there's not always a guarantee to have the funds to upgrade to electric. Any other questions? I hope I didn't turn you guys off from eating seafood.
You didn't. This has been fantastic. Thank you so
Okay,
much for
good.
sharing your knowledge with us. It's really eye-opening, and I think, we always say that, our purchases can really change the world, and in this case, it certainly it certainly can make a huge difference where we choose to spend our money. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you so much as well for folks. So,
Okay, great.
all right.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for tuning in. It's
Mhm.
great to have you.